Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Sukkah. We are up to Perek Gimel Mishnat Tetvav. Today's Mishnayot should be Leilun Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana, Aranbayev, and Alayev ben Burchai Israelov, and Lavdil ben Chaim L'Chaim for the Refuah Shenema Bacha Bat Esther, and Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, B'toch Shah Chulei Israel. This Mishnah discusses additional laws about the Lulav. The Mishnah begins, Mikabelet Isha Miyad Benah Miyad Ba'alah. A woman may receive the lulav from the hand of her son or from the hand of her husband after he performed the mitzvah with it. Now, generally, anything that is not a food or a utensil is muktzah, a category of objects that were forbidden by the rabbis to be moved on Shabbat and Yom Tov. A lulav, which is just a branch of a tree, ought to be included in this prohibition. If so, only men who are obligated to perform the mitzvah of the four species should be allowed to move a lulav on Shabbat and Yom Tov. But women who are not obligated should be forbidden to move it. The Mishnah teaches that this is not true. Rather, since a lulav may be moved by a man for the sake of the mitzvah, it has the halachic status of a utensil and as such may be moved by anybody. Umahazirato lamayim b'Shabbat, and put it back in its water on Shabbat to keep it fresh. Now, if the lulav was in water and then taken out on Shabbat, the Rav says it may be put back. But one may not put in water in the first place. Now the Mishnah refers to the time of the temple when the mitzvah of the four species was performed on Shabbat if it was the first day of Sukkot. Nowadays, when the mitzvah of the four species may not be observed on Shabbat, the lulav, hadassim, and aravot are indeed muktzah to everyone, including men. The etrog, however, is not muktzah at all because people use it to smell its fragrance. As Shulchan Aruch writes in Or Chaim, chapter 658, Halakha 2. The next Tana elaborates on the matter of putting a lulav in water on Sukkot. Rabbi Yehuda says, Bashabbat mahazirin. On Shabbat we may put it back into its water, but we may not add water and certainly not change the water. One may not add water to the container because that would be an effort for the purpose of repairing a utensil, which is the lulav. Since water preserves the moisture of the lulav, adding water somewhat resembles the act of repairing a utensil, which is prohibited on Shabbat. Nevertheless, adding water is forbidden only because some effort is involved. Simply putting the lulav back in the water, which requires no effort, is permitted. B'Yom Tov Mosifin, on Yom Tov we may add water, but we may not change the water. Now, despite the fact that adding water involves some effort, it is permitted on Yom Tov. Although this act is forbidden on Shabbat, it is permitted on Yom Tov, whose laws are less strict than those of Shabbat. Changing the water, however, requires more effort than adding water and is forbidden even on Yom Tov. Uba Moed mahalifin, and on Chol Moed we may change the water. In fact, the Rav says it is a mitzvah to change the water on Chol Moed in order to keep the lulav fresh. And the Rav does tell us, V'lachek Rabbi Yehuda, the halakha follows the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Another law concerning the mitzvah of the four species, Katana Yodel Na'aneh Chayav Belulav. A minor who is old enough to know how to wave the lulav is obligated to perform the mitzvah of lulav, meaning his father is rabbinically obligated to train him to perform the mitzvah of the four species. And that is then, Rabotai, of Perek Gimel Mishnat Tetvav. We continue now with Perek Daled Mishnah Aleph. In addition to the two mitzvot discussed so far in this Masechet, dwelling in the Sukkah and taking the four species, there are another 5 special mitzvot that apply in Sukkot, making a total of 7. This Mishnah lists all 7 mitzvot and states the number of days on Sukkot on which it is performed. Lulav v'arava shisha v'shiva. The mitzvah of lulav, taking the 4 species, and the mitzvah of arava, walking around the altar while holding aravot and then leaning them against the altar. This mitzvah is described in Mishnayot 5 and 6. It should not be confused with the mitzvah of taking 2 aravot together with the lulav. The Mishnah says this mitzvah of lulav and arava are performed in the temple either on 6 days of Sukkot or on all 7 days. The mitzvot of lulav and arava sometimes override Shabbat, in which case they are performed on all 7 days of Sukkot, and sometimes do not override Shabbat, in which case they are performed only on 6 days. This is explained in the following 2 Mishnayot. Ha-halel ve'asimcha shmona. The mitzvah of reciting halel and the mitzvah of rejoicing are performed on all 8 days of the holiday, meaning the 7 days of Sukkot and the 1 day of Shmini Atzeret. Now the Torah in Sefer Dvarim, chapter 16, pasuk 14 states in regard to Sukkot, V'samachta b'chagecha, you shall rejoice on your festival. When the temple stood the commandment of rejoicing was fulfilled by eating the meat of offerings. If a person did not have enough sacrificial meat for this purpose, he would bring shalamim offerings known as shalmei simcha, shalamim offerings of joy. Nowadays, the mitzvah is fulfilled in other ways, as taught in Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, chapter 5, 29, halacha 1 and 2. Now, on Sukkot, we recite Hallel every day, although on Pesach, we recite it on only the first day. Saying Hallel on the other days of Pesach is merely a custom, and to show that it is a custom, we do not recite certain parts. Every day of Sukkot requires its own Hallel, because a different number of Musaf offerings are brought on each day, making it somewhat separate from the other days. On Pesach, however, the Musaf offerings are the same every day. Hence, reciting Hallel on the first day suffices for the entire festival. We also say Hallel on Shmini Atzeret, the day of Yom Tov that falls the 7 days of Sukkot, because it is a Yom Tov in its own right. It is derived from a pasuk in the Torah that the mitzvah of rejoicing applies not only on Sukkot, but on Shmini Atzeret as well, as the Gemara says on page 48a in Masechet Sukkah. The Mishnah continues, Sukkah v'nisuch hamayim shiva. The mitzvah of dwelling in the Sukkah and the mitzvah of pouring water on the altar. Now, when the morning tamid is offered on each day of Sukkot, a Kohen pours water on the altar. This is the mitzvah of nisuch hamayim, pouring the water. These mitzvot are performed on all 7 days of Sukkot. The mitzvot of Sukkah and pouring the water, as well as the mitzvot of the 4 species in Arava, apply specifically on Sukkot and not on Shmini Atzeret. Ve'halir hamisha v'shisha. And the mitzvah of playing the flute together with the other musical instrument at the Simchat Bet HaShoeva is performed either on 5 days of Sukkot or on 6. Now, the ceremony of Simchat Bet HaShoeva, which celebrates the mitzvah of pouring the water, is described in the first half of chapter 5. Playing a musical instrument is forbidden on Shabbat and Yom Tov. Therefore, Simchat Bet HaShoeva is observed only on the days of Chol HaMoed that are not Shabbat. This could be either 5 or 6 days of Sukkot, depending on when Shabbat falls. Although other instruments too were played at the Simchat Bet HaShoeva, like we will see in chapter 5, Mishnah 4, the Mishnah specifies the flute because it was heard over the other instruments. And that is the Rabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.